Welcome to part 15 of this video series. Today we're going to be discussing heating and keeping your boat warm. Thank you for supporting the creation of this video series. If you haven't done so already, then please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos in this series. Okay, so unless you plan on living only in the little latitudes close to the equator, there will be at least some cool or cold nights that you will need to at least have a little bit of heat. And for those who live aboard during the shoulder seasons and those who spend their entire winters on board, we will talk more about permanent heating solutions. Personally, I can say I have lived on multiple boats over freezing Canadian winters, both in the water and on the hard. Having said that, I should point out that it's always better if you can spend it in the water and not on land. One of the main reasons for this is, unlike the air, water can never get any colder than about 0 degrees Celsius or 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Starting with cooler and going colder, the obvious way to help keep warm is to insulate your boat first. I can't stress enough the difference this can make. And then use your heaters and thick blankets. As we have said in previous videos, insulating a boat is not always easy, but it has so many advantages in cold and hot weather, including helping prevent condensation from building up, which can not only make your bed moist, but create mold and mildew. Some form of heat requires you to vent your boat and some don't. If you use some form of heat where you need ventilation, then do it. I know it sounds counterintuitive to open a crack in your hatch to keep warm, but it's very important. Nothing like falling asleep permanently because of fumes. The easiest hack to create heat is to put a clay pot upside down on your stove and run it for a long period. But with the exception of electric stoves, all marine stoves give off some form of fumes. Running some stoves, for example propane, for very short periods, like when you're cooking, is not as important to vent, but if you're going to be running it for a very long time, like when you're heating, then you must have some form of ventilation. For a long time, this was my method of dealing with a cold night. I would just put a clay pot on the stove at night to get comfortable and then turn it off before going to sleep. And then I would do it again in the morning. Except for I usually used a second burner to make a cup of coffee, which provided even more heat. This worked on the shoulder seasons, but when I started to stay on board in Canadian winters, it was no longer effective. Plus, getting up in the morning, climbing out of your warm blanket to start the stove was really less than pleasant. There are a lot of people when camp cruising, which I'll do another series on later, use a candle heater, but these really don't provide that much heat. You can try it, it may even change the temperature inside by a degree or so, but I think these are really good only for small cuddy cabins. If you stay at a Marina or Yacht Club full time, then you might be able to use electric heaters. Electrical heaters are very simple. They're portable and built-in models. When I lived on a small boat over the winter, I used a portable electric ceramic heater, which did the job during most days. It even had a built-in thermostat that more or less kept the boat from getting too hot on mild days. I had it set up so I felt comfortable leaving it on when I was at work, etc. But when we did have cold snaps, it would go down to like -40 at night, so I had a Force 10 diesel heater I would turn on, and to be honest, it would turn it into a sauna. But at least I wasn't freezing. The nice thing about the Force 10 is it was a dry heat as opposed to the electric heater, which gave off wet heat. Any heater that the combustion is vented outside of the boat will give off dry heat. This is something you really need to think about when deciding on your heating solution. If your heater produces wet heat, then you'll have condensation and the problems that go with that to deal with. There are many different types of gas heaters on the market, from built-in models to portable, from expensive to more or less cheap. Starting at the bottom, you get the portable propane and butane models. These are simply too cheap because they do need to be vented and they don't provide enough heat to compensate for it. Plus, you want to avoid or convert anything that uses disposable fuel canisters. Besides the environmental reasons, they only last for a few hours, so you'd have to be replacing the canisters all the time. If you only need a touch of heat now and then, I guess portable canisters would be okay. But remember, different gases need different amount of ventilations. Out of all the gases, I believe propane needs the least amount. It is why propane infrared heaters like the Buddy series are the best if you need a portable heater with just a little venting. Diesel heaters are the next most common type of boat heaters. What's nice about these is they can be connected to your main fuel tank, as long as your boat runs on diesel, that is, and you don't have multiple fuel types. Plus, diesel is a lot more available at marinas than, let's say, propane. Also, because it's a liquid fuel and not compressed gas, it's a lot lighter to carry. An empty jerry can is a lot lighter to carry than an empty propane tank. The only warning I can give is if you do connect it to your main fuel tank, Remember, if you run your heater all night, to make sure you still have enough fuel to run your boat the next day. I know of people who have learned this the hard way. These go from moderately expensive to very expensive. Starting with the more expensive Dickinson-style heaters, these are easily the most reliable heaters. The great thing about these is they don't require any electricity. They do use passive heating and not forced air, so they should be placed as close to the center of the room as possible. Some of these have glass fronts on them that look like a little fireplace, which can be really nice in a small cabin. Next is forced air style diesel heaters. These used to be fairly expensive, but Chinese knockoffs have lowered the price. I haven't used a knockoff yet myself, but surprisingly I haven't heard any bad reviews for them. In fact, I was talking to someone who's been using one for the last decade and swears by it. The only thing I have heard is some of the accessories that come with them are cheap and should be replaced, like cheap hoses and clamps, etc. What is bad about the forced air diesel heaters is that they can be complex to set up in the first place. But once they're all set up, they're actually the simplest to use. To operate them is not much harder than operating your home furnace. You basically just set the temperature on the thermostat and you're done. Some even connect to home AI systems like Alexa or Google Home. Another advantage to this type of heater is it can be mounted in multiple places, like in a storage bin. A lot of small boats don't have much bulkhead space to mount a bulkhead style heater, so this can be a much better option for you. The last of the common style of heaters is the solid fuel heater. Most of these are basically mini versions of a wood stove. Let's face it, there are few things as pleasant or romantic as watching a wood fire burn. Traditionally, these were too large for a small liveaboard boat, but today some great miniature versions have hit the market. For example, the cubic wood stove. If you have the space to install these, they're always a nice feature to have. Another fantastic thing about these I should mention is they provide a nice dry heat. Now, having said that, you may have an issue with finding and storing the wood for them. You cannot leave them unattended, and because they only accept small sticks and logs, they have to be fed quite often. They are really great in the morning or in the evening, but don't provide much heat while you're asleep or not on board. Another type of solid fuel heater is the wood pellet heater. These are starting to hit the market, and they're great because they have a small window where you can see the fire, the fuel is easy to get and store, and they can be controlled by thermostat. The problem is I've yet to find one small enough to mount in a small liveaboard boat. So if you know of one of these, please let me know in the comment below. In closing, whether you use a clay pot on a stove, a built-in wood-burning stove, or a combination of methods, there are a lot of options from very cheap to very expensive. All you can do is figure out how much you need and try different things and figure out what works best for you. If you have any ideas that I have not covered in this video, please let me know in the comments below. I always love hearing from you. And again, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video series on living aboard a small boat. If you have, then please subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Also, I included links to all the past videos in the description below.